The mail cart rolled down the narrow hallway of Texas State Penitentiary with a metallic squeal, the sound cutting to the echoing noise of inmates shouting, laughing, and cursing from their cells. Ethan Cole didn't look up at first. He had stopped expecting letters years ago. The world outside had moved on. Friends, family, even his wife, Mara, who now visited only when she had to. But when the guard stopped at his cell and slid an envelope through the bars, Ethan's heart stuttered. There was no name on the return address. Just a single word written in shaky cursive, Calverly. He stared at it for a long time before picking it up. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the strange familiarity of the handwriting. He tore the envelope open. Inside was a short, typewritten note. She wasn't who you think she was. You should have known better. Some lies burn slower than others. No signature. No explanation. Ethan read it again. And again, his mind replayed every moment with Mara. The way she avoided certain questions. The time she'd disappear for hours. The fear that flashed across her face whenever he mentioned his past. But this felt different. This was personal. Whoever wrote this knew her. He sat on the edge of his bunk, elbows on his knees, staring at the concrete floor as the sound of the other inmates faded. He could almost smell Mara's perfume, hear her soft laughter echoing in his head. The memory twisted into something sharp, something that cut deeper than any prison shank could. He whispered to himself, "What did you do, Mara?" The days that followed turned the prison into a labyrinth of paranoia. Ethan carried the letter with him like contraband, hidden inside the lining of his Bible. He started watching everyone, the guards, the inmates, even the chaplain. Someone had sent that letter inside a maximum security facility. That meant connections, power, intent. One evening during yard time, Ethan approached Raymond, a thin, wiry inmate known for getting things done for a price. "You ever heard Calverly?" Ethan asked quietly. Raymond squinted. "You got business there?" "Just a question." Raymond smirked. "That's in West Texas. Dead town. Used to have a paper mill. Burned down, 20 years ago?" Ethan didn't respond, but something inside him shifted. A burned town. A letter from a ghost place. That night, lying on his bunk, Ethan stared at the ceiling, his mind spiraling. He remembered the day Mara testified at his trial, the trembling in her voice, the way she couldn't meet his eyes when the prosecutor mentioned the night of the robbery. He'd always told himself she was scared. Now, he wondered if she was hiding something else. Sleep didn't come. When the first light of dawn slipped through the barred window, Ethan was still awake, still holding the letter, tracing its words with his thumb until the ink smudged. The last line, "Some lies burn slower than others," replayed over and over until it didn't sound like a warning anymore. It sounded like a confession. He folded the paper neatly, slid it back inside the envelope, and whispered, "I'll find out." Outside, a whistle blew, signaling breakfast. The noise of boots, voices, and clanging bars returned. But Ethan didn't move. His world had just shifted, and he knew, with a cold, aching certainty, that whatever truth waited in Calverly, it wasn't going to set him free. It was going to destroy everything left of him. And somewhere far beyond the prison walls, in a quiet town nearly erased from memory, someone, perhaps the sender, folded another letter. This one bore only 2 words on the envelope. "He knows." The words from the letter haunted Ethan long after the cell lights dimmed that night. She wasn't who you think she was. They looped endlessly in his head, pulling him backward through time, back before the bars, before the concrete walls, to the woman who once made him believe in something close to redemption. He'd met Mara at a diner off Highway 40, a late-night stop after one of the small-time hustles. She was a waitress who smiled too kindly at a man who didn't deserve it. Soft voice, auburn hair tied back, and eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 secrets she'd never tell. Ethan remembered thinking she looked out of place there, like she'd wandered in from another life. For months, she was as calm. She didn't ask about his past, and he didn't ask about hers. It worked. Until the night she woke screaming, whispering a name that wasn't his. "Thomas! No! Please, Thomas!" He'd shaken her awake, but she wouldn't say a word about it. The next morning, her smile returned, but it felt like something borrowed. Too perfect, too deliberate. In the prison silence, Ethan's mind replayed every conversation, every slip she made. Her refusal to be photographed, her sudden panic when she saw a newspaper headline about a fire years ago in West Texas, the way she'd once torn up a letter before opening it, her hands trembling as she fed the scraps into the sink garbage disposal. "Mara," he muttered into the darkness, "what the hell did you do?" He had once believed she saved him. When he was arrested for armed robbery, she'd been there, crying on the stand, begging the jury for mercy. Yet, now that memory looked different. He remembered her trembling not from grief, but from guilt, her eyes darting toward the gallery as though someone else was watching her. A sound broke his thoughts, the clang of steel against concrete. Lights flickered as the guards made their rounds. Ethan sat up, rubbing his temples. He felt a pressure behind his eyes, the kind that came from knowing something terrible and not being able to prove it. He took the letter out again, reading the word Calverly until it blurred. He tried saying it aloud, Calverly, Calverly. The name felt foreign, yet familiar. Somewhere, deep inside his memory, it tugged at something he couldn't quite reach. A burned town, a name she'd whispered in her sleep. And now, a letter that had somehow found its way into a maximum security prison. Ethan lay back on his bunk, staring at the cracked ceiling above him. Mara's face drifted in his mind. Her soft laugh, her warm hands, her lies. The woman who used to sit across from him in the visitor's booth and promise she'd never give up on him. But that woman didn't exist anymore. Maybe she never had. He closed his eyes, and the last image before sleep claimed him was her smile, that perfect, practiced smile that once fooled him into thinking he was loved. Morning came. The guards barked his name for mail again. There was nothing this time. No letter, no word, no sign. Only silence. And in that silence, Ethan decided he couldn't live without answers. The silence that followed the letter's arrival became louder than the noise that filled the prison halls. Ethan couldn't think straight anymore. Every clang of the cell door, every echo of footsteps in the corridor seemed like a whisper from someone who already knew too much. He had been here for 4 years. 4 years of routine control and surrender. But after that letter, the walls around him began to feel alive, listening, waiting, breathing in his secrets. Breakfast was the same watery oatmeal and stale bread. Ethan barely touched it. Across the cafeteria, Raymond sat with his usual crew, men who traded favors like currency. Raymond was slick, dangerous, and too smart for his own good. Ethan watched him for a long time before finally standing up and walking over. "Got a minute?" he asked. Raymond's eyes flicked up, sharp and amused. "Depends who's asking." "I need information," Ethan said quietly, "about a place called Calverly." Raymond grinned. "You're asking about ghost towns now, preacher man? You trying to escape or summon the dead?" Ethan didn't laugh. He slid a folded cigarette paper across the table. Inside, a thin strip of contraband painkillers he'd saved from his last infirmary visit. Raymond's eyes lit up. "Now we're talking," he said, tucking it into his sleeve. "Give me a few days." The days turned into restless nights. Ethan tried to focus on work duty, scrubbing laundry and folding uniforms, but his thoughts kept circling back to Mara. Who had she been before him? What had she done in Calverly? He remembered the way she froze once when a TV news report mentioned a fire that had killed a family near that name. She quickly changed the channel, smiling like nothing had happened. He hadn't questioned her then. He'd been in love, or blind. Maybe both. 3 days later, Raymond slipped a note under Ethan's tray in the mess hall. Old place. Factory fire, 98. Lots dead. Woman disappeared. Name Elena Duval. Ring a bell? Ethan's hands trembled. Elena Duval. The name felt wrong and familiar at the same time. He folded the paper and hid it under his sleeve. That night, he waited until lights out. The cell block went quiet, except for the occasional cough, snore, or scream echoing from far down the hall. He took out the paper again, reading it in the dim light. Elena Duval. Could Mara have been her? No, it was impossible. But the thought wouldn't leave. He barely heard the footsteps coming until the shadow stopped outside his cell. "Cole," a voice whispered. It was Raymond. His face looked pale. Raymond never finished that night's conversation. By morning, word spread fast. He'd been found in the laundry room, face swollen and bloodied, barely breathing. No one saw what happened, but everyone understood the message. Don't dig too deep. Ethan didn't sleep for days after that. The note Raymond had slipped him, Elena Duval, was now burned into his memory like a scar. Whoever that name belonged to, it was clear someone didn't want him to know. And then, just when the tension inside him had turned to exhaustion, she came. The guards called his name during visitor hours. It startled him. Mara hadn't visited in nearly 8 months. He half expected it to be a trick, a setup, but when he was escorted to the visitor's booth, his breath caught in his throat. She sat behind the glass, looking different. Her once golden hair was darker now, cropped shorter. The glow she used to carry, that gentle warmth in her smile, was gone. What remained was a woman made of quiet panic. "Mara," he breathed, picking up the phone. She hesitated before lifting hers. "You look thin," she said softly. "I didn't think you were coming back." "I wasn't going to," she replied, her tone flat, eyes darting to the guard behind him. "But I thought you deserved to hear it from me." "Hear what?" he asked, heart pounding. "That you need to stop asking questions." Her voice trembled on the last word. It wasn't a threat. It was fear. Real fear. Ethan leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Who sent the letter, Mara?" Her fingers clenched around the phone cord. "Don't do this. You know what's in it." She shook her head quickly. "No, I don't." She paused, swallowing hard. "Ethan, please. Promise me you'll let this go. Just serve your time. It's safer that way." "Safer for who?" he asked quietly. Her gaze met his, and for a fleeting second, something broke in her expression. Guilt, maybe sorrow, maybe both. "I can't protect you from what's out there," she whispered. "Not this time." The guard tapped his watch, signaling the end of their session. Ethan pressed his hand against the glass. "Mara, wait, what'd you do?" She hesitated, tears glinting in her eyes, then whispered something so faint he almost didn't catch it. "Calverly wasn't supposed to follow me." Then she stood and walked away without looking back. The door buzzed open, and the guard led Ethan out. He didn't resist. His mind was reeling, her words echoing like a heartbeat in his skull. Calverly wasn't supposed to follow me. That night, Ethan sat alone in his cell. Outside, rain lashed against the narrow windows, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the flat Texas plain. He took the letter from his Bible, unfolding it once more. The edges were soft now, worn from his shaking hands. He read the words again. She wasn't who you think she was, and realized the truth was no longer a question. It was a destination, and he was already planning how to get there. The rain that followed Mara's visit lingered for days, drumming on the tin roof of the cell block like a slow, mocking heartbeat. Ethan sat on his bunk, replaying her words in his mind. Calverly wasn't supposed to follow me. It wasn't a warning. It was an admission, and it changed everything. He no longer saw the prison as a cage. It was an obstacle, something temporary, something that could be outsmarted. The idea began small, almost laughable. Escape. Everyone here fantasized about it, but few had the patience to make it real. Ethan, however, had nothing left but patience and a burning need for answers. He started with a guard on night duty, Officer Reeves, a heavy-set man with sweat-stained collars and a gambling problem. Reeves spent his shifts muttering about debts and bad luck. Never realizing the inmate he vented was memorizing every weakness. One night, Ethan caught him alone during cell inspection. "You still owe $2,000 to the bookie in Tyler, right?" Ethan asked casually. Reeves froze, flashlight trembling slightly in his grip. "How the hell do you know that?" "I listen," Ethan said simply, "and I can help you fix it." He slid a folded note through the bars. Inside were the contact details of a man outside, a favor owed from years back. Ethan's last lifeline. "He'll settle your debt if you do something for me. Small, quiet, clean." Reeves hesitated, his jaw working. "What kind of something?" Ethan smiled faintly. "A phone. Just one call. No trace." The phone arrived 2 weeks later, hidden inside a box of cleaning rags. Ethan spent 3 nights dismantling and reassembling it beneath the flickering light, using scraps in the workshop to make it functional. His hand shook not from fear, but from anticipation. He dialed a number he remembered by heart, the man who owed him everything. A mechanic named Silas Trent, once his getaway driver, now running a junkyard in Amarillo. When Silas answered, his voice was cautious. "Ethan? Jesus, I thought you were gone." "Not yet," Ethan said. "I need a name. Elena Duval, West Texas, late 90s. There was silence on the line. Then a slow exhale. "You don't want that smoke, brother." "Tell me anyway." She worked at the Calverly paper mill. Big fire there killed 5 people, her husband and kid included, they said. But word was, she said it, insurance scam gone bad. Disappeared before the cops could charge her. Ethan's blood ran cold. "So she's dead," Silas finished. "Or supposed to be." That night, Ethan pried loose the rusted vent behind his sink. The smell of mildew hit him like a wave. He discovered it months ago, a cavity that connected to a disused drainage tunnel. The maintenance map he'd memorized during his janitor shifts confirmed it led outside the west fence. Every night after lockdown, he worked silently, scraping concrete dust, clearing space inch by inch. The tunnel became his obsession, his secret heartbeat beneath the floor. But secrets have weight, and the prison walls had ears. One evening, while he was working, a voice whispered from the darkness beyond the vent. "You're not the only one digging, Cole." Ethan froze. A shadow moved. Another inmate, hidden in the crawl space, watching. The man's face was invisible, but his voice was low and steady. "Whatever you're looking for, stop. Calverly's curse don't end at the gate." Before Ethan could respond, the shadow was gone, leaving behind a faint echo of a laugh that didn't sound human. He sat there in silence, heart hammering, realizing what that meant. Someone else in this prison knew about Mara's past. Someone who wanted him to stay buried, just like the truth. The storm arrived without warning, a heavy, relentless downpour that turned the Texas sky black and rattled the prison windows like chains being shaken by an unseen hand. Thunder rolled over the compound, drowning out the usual noise of shouts and metal doors. For the first time in years, Ethan felt the air change, thick, electric, alive. He had been waiting for a night like this. The plan had lived in his head for weeks, mapped and memorized, every second calculated. The vent behind the sink was ready. The guard he'd bribed was on shift. All he needed was chaos, and nature was providing it. Lightning flashed, illuminating the cracks in the ceiling. He pressed his ear to the vent one last time, listening to the faint sound of rainwater rushing through the drainage tunnels below. His pulse quickened. It was time. At exactly 2:07 a.m., the power flickered. Then everything went dark. Shouts erupted from down the corridor as backup generators struggled to kick in. Ethan slid the sink aside and dropped in the hole beneath his cell. The concrete scraped his shoulders as he crawled to the narrow space, the smell of damp and rust choking him. His hands were raw, his knees bleeding, but he kept moving. He didn't think about what waited outside, only about Mara's trembling voice behind the glass, whispering, "Calverly wasn't supposed to follow me." Somewhere in the blackness, a memory surfaced. Her laughter, soft and warm, echoing through their old apartment. The way she'd whispered, "I love you," right before everything went wrong. He pushed the memory away. Love was what had blinded him before. Truth was the only thing that mattered now. The tunnel opened into a wider drain, cold water swirling around his boots. He waded through it until he reached the old service grate. Lightning flashed again, and for a moment he saw his reflection in the water, pale, hollow-eyed, more ghost than man. He jammed the screwdriver into the bolts until the metal gave way. The grate fell forward with a clang that disappeared under thunder. Then he was outside. The rain felt unreal against his skin, sharp, cleansing, almost holy. For a second, he stood there, head tilted to the sky, breathing like a man reborn. By dawn, the alarms had begun to scream. Guards flooded the corridors, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The warden's voice thundered through the intercom. Inmate Ethan Cole, number 46,712. Escaped during power failure. All units initiate lockdown. They found the hole behind the sink 2 hours later, etched into the wall above it. In letters carved deep into concrete was a single word, liar. For the next 48 hours, the state launched one of the largest manhunts in years. Roads were blocked, helicopters swept over nearby fields, and dogs combed every creek bed within 20 miles. But Ethan Cole had vanished into the storm, like smoke carried off the wind. And 2 days later, something else happened that no one could explain. Mara Cole didn't show up for work. Her car was found abandoned on a back road leading out of town. Driver's door open, headlights still on. Her phone was inside the seat. The last call she made was to a number that no longer existed. The same number that once belonged to Ethan's prison cell phone contact. The investigators pieced together what little they could, but the story had already started writing itself. The escaped inmate, the vanished wife, the storm that swallowed them both. In the files, it became known as the Calverly disappearance. But somewhere out there, on an empty stretch of highway beneath that same gray sky, Ethan was still running, not from justice, but from the truth he'd been chasing since the first letter arrived. And what waited for him next would change everything he thought he knew about love, guilt, and the dead. Rain still clung to the cracked asphalt when Clara Jensen arrived in Calverly, a town so quiet it felt like the world had forgotten it existed. The road sign was half rusted, the welcome billboard split down the middle, as if the place itself wanted to hide its name. Clara had been following the case of Ethan and Mara Cole for months, ever since the story hit the front pages. Escaped inmate vanishes. Wife missing days later. But what caught her attention wasn't the crime. It was a connection. The letter, the burned town, the name Elena Duval whispered in prison records. Now she was standing where all those ghosts began. The old main street was a skeleton, boarded shops, peeling paint, and silence so deep that even the wind seemed to tread carefully. Locals didn't make eye contact. The few who did glanced away the second she mentioned Mara's name. She stopped at the only place still open, Hendrick's Diner, the kind of small-town cafe that smelled like coffee and secrets. The waitress, an older woman with weary eyes, studied Clara's press badge. "You're not from around here." "No," Clara replied, offering a polite smile. "I'm looking into the Calverly paper mill fire. 1998. Do you remember a woman named Elena Duval?" The waitress froze mid-pour, coffee spilling over the rim of the mug. For a moment, the only sound was the drip of liquid onto the counter. Then, in a whisper, "Some names are better left buried, sweetheart." Outside, the storm clouds had begun to gather again. Clara stepped into the rain, notebook clutched to her chest. She'd heard warnings like that before, from people who knew too much and lived in fear of remembering. She drove toward the outskirts, following the dirt road that led to what used to be the Calverly paper mill. Nature had reclaimed it. Trees growing through rusted machinery, the ground still scorched in places where the fire had burned hottest. Clara parked the car and walked closer. The air smelled faintly of ash, even after all these years. A weather-beaten sign still read, "Calverly Paper and Pulp So." Yesterday, 1974, she crouched beside the collapsed wall, brushing away soot and debris until something caught her eye, a half-buried metal box, blackened from heat. Inside, waterlogged photographs stuck together like melted memories. She peeled one apart carefully. A woman stared back at her, young, beautiful, familiar, Mara Cole. But the back of the photo told a different story. In faded ink, someone had written, "Elena Duval, 1996. With Thomas." Clara's chest tightened. A child stood beside Mara in the picture, a little boy, maybe 6 years old, smiling with missing teeth. The boy who wasn't supposed to exist. She drove back to town, her mind spinning. The official records listed no surviving family from the fire. The Duvals were declared dead, all three of them, but the photograph changed everything. If Mara was Elena, she'd faked her own death. If Ethan found out, maybe that was why he escaped. That night, Clara checked into a small roadside motel and spread her notes across the bed. Articles, photographs, and copies of prison transcripts. One line from Ethan's last recorded conversation stood out, his voice rough, distant. "I just need to know what she was running from." Clara closed her notebook and stared out the window. The rain had stopped, but fog rolled over the town like smoke, swallowing the mill in the distance. Somewhere beyond it, a single light flickered, faint, rhythmic, almost deliberate. A signal? She grabbed her keys. Minutes later, she was standing on the ridge, overlooking the burned ruins again. The flickering light came from a small shack near the treeline. The door creaked as she pushed it open, and the first thing she saw was a wall covered in photographs of Mara Cole. Newspapers, maps, and scribbled notes covered the table. At the center was a Polaroid taken only weeks ago. Mara, standing at a gas station, alive. Clara's hand shook as she lifted it. Someone had written across the bottom in ink still fresh, "She's not done hiding." The Polaroid trembled in Clara's hands, its edges slick with the damp air of the shack. Mara, or Elena Duval, as the writing on the older photo had revealed, stood smiling faintly beside a child. That same child appeared again in several photos pinned to the wall, each one taken years apart, growing older, always standing near the edges of crowds or blurred in motion. Someone had been tracking them. Clara's breath fogged the air. She scanned the cluttered walls again, maps, news clippings, and notes written in tight, hurried handwriting. One stood out, underlined 3 times in red ink. He wasn't supposed to survive the fire. The word sent a chill racing up her spine. Back in her motel room, Clara spread the photographs across the bed like puzzle pieces. The timeline made no sense. The Calverly fire happened in 1998. All 3 Duvals were listed as deceased. Yet here was proof that Elena, under her new name Mara Cole, had lived on for decades. And the child, she zoomed in on a scanned version of the photo on her laptop. The boy's face, round, bright eyes, dimple on the left cheek, matched someone else she'd seen before. She flipped through her files, landing on an old prison intake photo of Ethan Cole. Same dimple, same eyes. The connection hit her like a blow. The boy was Ethan. If her theory was right, then Ethan was Mara's husband by blood or by marriage. He was her son. The revelation felt impossible, too twisted to believe, but the photographs told a story that no record ever had. Clara picked up a recorder and spoke softly into it. Mara Cole, formerly Elena Duval, paper mill survivor, faked her death after the fire, reappeared under a new identity, raised her own child as someone else's. Ethan Cole may not be her husband, but her son. She paused, her voice trembling. If Ethan discovered this truth in prison, that could explain everything. Morning light spilled through the blinds when she returned to Hendrick's diner. The waitress, the same woman from before, watched her warily. Clara slid one of the photographs across the counter. "This woman, you said her name once. Elena Duval. You knew her, didn't you?" The woman's jaw tightened. Knew her? Everyone in Calverly did. She was trouble before the fire, and worse after. What happened to the baby? Clara asked. The waitress hesitated, eyes darting toward the window. That boy was never supposed to be found. When the mill burned, the sheriff said they found 2 bodies. But there were 3 people in that house. Are you saying she took the child? I'm saying, the woman whispered, voice trembling, that she ran because of what that boy saw. That night, Clara drove back to the shack. The Polaroids were gone, the map stripped from the walls. Only one item remained pinned to the wooden beam, a torn piece of notebook paper, fluttering in the draft. In bold, jagged handwriting, it read, "Stop digging, Clara. Some bloodlines don't forgive." Her pulse quickened. She turned to leave and froze. A faint rustling came from the trees outside. A shadow moved, slow and deliberate, between the trunks. She couldn't see the face, but she could feel the eyes watching her. And then, from somewhere in the darkness, a voice, low, cracked, and unmistakably male. "You don't know who she really was?" Clara spun around, but the forest had gone silent again. The motel room felt colder that night, not from the November air seeping through the window, but from the weight of the words still echoing in Clara's head. "You don't know who she really was?" She hadn't slept. Every creak outside made her reach for her recorder, ready to document whatever came next. Whoever was watching her at the shack had followed her back. She could feel it. When dawn broke, she found an envelope pushed halfway under her door. No name, no address, just a single word written across the front in black ink. Listen. Inside was a small cassette tape. Clara's hands trembled as she slid the tape into her old recorder, the kind she used for interviews. A hiss filled the air, followed by static, then a woman's voice, soft and unsteady. If someone finds this, it means I couldn't keep running. Clara froze. The voice was unmistakable. Mara Cole. My name isn't Mara. It never was. My real name is Elena Duval. And I did something no one will ever understand. A heavy pause. The faint sound of breathing. Then the click of a lighter, like someone was pacing while recording. They said the fire was an accident. It wasn't. I started it. The words cracked like gunfire through the silence. Clara's heart raced. He was going to take my son. Thomas, my husband. He found out Ethan wasn't his. He wasn't even supposed to know I'd had an affair. I just wanted to protect my boy. A sob echoed through the tape. But it went wrong. I never meant for him to die. Not like that. The fire spread too fast. I thought Ethan was gone too. I thought I'd lost everything. Static again. A shaky inhale. So I became Mara Cole. I built a life that wasn't mine, with the guilt buried under every breath I took. But now he knows. Ethan knows who I am. He found the letter. Another silence. This one heavier, drawn out, like she was trying to gather strength. If he's listening, Ethan, I'm sorry. You were never supposed to find out this way. But you deserve the truth. Just know I loved you, even when I couldn't face what I'd done. A final click. The tape ended. Clara sat motionless, the recorder still spinning in the silence. The entire story had just unraveled. The fire, the false identity, the forbidden secret. Mara hadn't just been Ethan's wife. She had been his mother, his protector, and his destroyer all at once. It explained his rage, his escape, his disappearance. The letter he'd found in prison must have been her confession, the one that shattered everything he believed about his life. Clara needed confirmation. She grabbed her bag and drove to the sheriff's office, her heart pounding. Sheriff Dale Hargreaves was a broad, aging man with eyes dulled by too many small-town tragedies. When she played him the tape, he didn't speak for nearly a minute. Then he said quietly, "That voice, I remember it. Elena Duval called the station once, years ago. Said someone was following her. We thought she was paranoid." "Someone was following her," Clara whispered. "Maybe Ethan." The sheriff frowned. "No, Ethan wasn't the only one who escaped that prison." Clara's head snapped up. "What do you mean?" He opened a folder, yellowed and thin. Cell next to his. Inmate named Thomas Raines. Went by an alias before he was caught. But his real name was Thomas Duval. Her husband. Her blood ran cold. That night, Clara replayed the tape over and over, searching for any hidden detail. At the very end, just before the click, a faint sound emerged beneath the static. Not breathing this time. A voice. Low, broken, whispering close to the mic. "You can't hide from both of us." Her breath caught. She rewound it twice more. The words were real. If Thomas Duval was alive and had escaped too, then Ethan wasn't the only one hunting Mara. And maybe the man who left that tape wasn't Ethan at all. The words, "You can't hide from both of us," haunted Clara long after the recorder stopped spinning. The voice on the tape wasn't Ethan's. It carried a deeper rasp, one that trembled with age and fury. Thomas Duval, the husband who was supposed to have burned to death in the Calverly fire. Now, it seemed the flames hadn't claimed him. They had only made him patient. By dusk, Claire was driving down the winding back roads outside Calverly, following the coordinates scribbled on the back of the cassette case. The forest grew denser the farther she went, branches clawing against the windshield as rain began to fall again. Finally, her headlights caught sight of a house, small, sagging under its own age, half swallowed by the woods. A rusted mailbox read, Miller's Creek Road, number 4. The same location mentioned in the sheriff's old report. Clara parked a few yards away and approached on foot, recorder in hand, her boots sinking into the wet soil. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of mildew and smoke. She flicked on her flashlight. The walls were covered in old photographs, burnt around the edges, warped by water damage. Each image was of Elena Duval, smiling in moments of tenderness, holding a child, sitting beside a man on the porch, laughing in sunlight. Beneath the smiles, someone had carved words into the wood in shaky handwriting. She took everything. Clara's beam fell on a small table in the center of the room. A new cassette lay there, labeled in black marker. For Ethan, her throat tightened as she pressed play. A man's voice filled the silence, low, seething and unmistakably Thomas Duval's. You thought she was your savior. Boy, she wasn't. She took my name, my life, and told you lies about who you were. You were my son, but she made you forget me. Static hissed, then his tone grew darker. She burned me alive for trying to take you back. But I lived. I waited while she rebuilt her world with another name. And when you found the truth, when you broke free, I followed. Clara covered her mouth, heart pounding. The story she thought she was uncovering, the mother's guilt, the son's confusion, was something else entirely. It wasn't just love and betrayal. It was revenge wearing a mask of grief. The voice continued. You think you're hunting her, Ethan, but I've already found her. And when I'm done, there'll be nothing left to hide from. The tape clicked off. Clara's hand trembled as she removed it. Somewhere out there, both men were alive, both hunting the same woman, each driven by their own twisted truth. She turned toward the living room, where something caught her eye, a set of muddy footprints leading to the back door. Fresh. Outside, rain poured harder, washing away any clear trail. But in the distance, through the trees, she saw a faint orange glow. Fire. By the time she reached the clearing, the small cabin ahead was already half engulfed. Flames danced across the roof, sparks rising into the dark sky. And standing just beyond the blaze, his silhouette illuminated in orange light, was a man, tall, shoulders broad, his face hidden beneath a hood. Clara shouted, Ethan! The figure turned slightly. For a second, the light revealed a scar, one that ran from his cheek to his jaw, the mark of a burn long healed. Not Ethan. Thomas. He disappeared into the trees before she could reach him. The cabin collapsed moments later, a wave of heat forcing her back. When the fire finally died, Clara stepped closer. Amid the ashes, she saw something glinting, a metal locket half melted but still intact. She pried it open with shaking fingers. Inside was a tiny photograph, a younger Elena holding baby Ethan, both smiling. On the other side of the locket, etched faintly in smoke-blackened silver, were 3 words, Love burned first. Clara's tears mixed with the rain. The line blurred between love, obsession, and vengeance. It was clear none of them had escaped the fire's shadow. But somewhere out there, Ethan was still alive. And if Thomas had found Mara, that meant one last confrontation was coming. The kind that wouldn't end quietly. Clara pocketed the locket and turned toward her car. The final chapter of the Calverly tragedy was still unwritten, and she was driving straight into it. The storm hadn't stopped since the night the cabin burned. Water streamed down the mountain roads like veins of silver, feeding into the Calverly River, the same river that had swallowed so many secrets 27 years ago. Clara drove in silence, the wiper struggling against a relentless rain. The sheriff's radio crackled in the passenger seat. Beside her, unidentified remains found along Miller's Creek, female, possibly early 40s. Her pulse quickened. That could only mean one thing, Mara, but something in her gut told her not to believe the first report. Calverly was a place where truth was often half buried, like the bodies it left behind. When she reached the scene, flashing lights reflected off the slick mud and trembling river water. Deputies worked beneath plastic tarps, shouting over the roar of the current. Clara slipped past the yellow tape, flashing her press credentials. Sheriff Hargreaves didn't stop her this time. She was found here, he muttered, pointing to a tangled mess of roots near the riverbank, drifted down from upstream. No ID yet, but the burns, they match our old photos of Elena Duval. Clara crouched near the tarp. Through the rain, she could barely see the face, half charred, half submerged. But there was something odd, a thin silver chain wrapped around the wrist. "The locket," she whispered. "I had it." The sheriff frowned. "What?" Clara opened her coat pocket. It was empty. Her stomach dropped. She'd lost it, or someone had taken it. That night, back at the motel, the sound of the river seemed to follow her. Every gust of wind against the window pane felt like a whisper. She spread her notes across the bed, photos, transcripts, fragments of confession tape, trying to map what she knew. 3 people, 1 fire, 2 survivors. But now there was a fourth presence, unseen, circling. The motel phone rang. Clara startled. She hesitated before answering. "You shouldn't have gone to the river." A voice rasped. Her breath caught. "Ethan?" A pause. Then, "You don't understand. She's not the one in that river." The line went dead. Clara's heartbeat pounded in her ears. If that wasn't Mara's body, then who had they found? She grabbed her keys and drove to the old Calverly bridge, the one that crossed just upstream. The rain had stopped, leaving a low mist hovering over the water. Below, the current churned violently against the rocks. Her flashlight beam caught something near the shore, a trail of footprints, leading down from the embankment, ending at the water's edge. Fresh ones. "Ethan," she called out. No answer. Only the sound of the river, heavy, alive, whispering against the stones. Then, from the shadows beneath the bridge, a figure stepped out. A man drenched, exhausted, eyes hollow. Ethan. He looked older, haunted, as if the years had burned through him instead of passing by. "She's alive, isn't she?" Clara asked softly. Ethan's voice cracked. "You think I'd kill her? After everything?" "No, I found her first." "But so did he." He turned toward the forest. "Thomas took her. He wants me to finish what she started." Before Clara could speak, headlights cut through the fog from the far end of the bridge. A truck approached. Slow, deliberate. Ethan grabbed her arm. "Run." The roar of the engine grew louder. The river below surged, wild and unforgiving, as thunder rolled over Calverly once more. The truck's headlights tore through the fog like knives, blinding Clara and Ethan as it screeched to a halt at the far end of the bridge. The engine idled, low and menacing. Ethan's grip tightened on Clara's wrist. "It's him." Before she could respond, the driver's door creaked open. A figure stepped out, tall, wrapped in a raincoat, his face hidden beneath the shadow of his hat. The storm had died, but thunder still rumbled somewhere far off, like the echo of unfinished business. Thomas Duval. He walked slowly toward them, his boots striking the wet planks of the bridge. In one hand, he carried a pistol. In the other, something far more fragile, the silver locket Clara thought she'd lost. "Don't move," he said, voice sharp with old rage. "Not this time." Clara's instinct screamed to run, but Ethan stepped forward, shielding her. "You don't need to do this," he said, his voice trembling but steady. "She's gone. Let her go." Thomas's laugh was hollow. "You think she deserves peace after what she did? After what she took from me? From you?" "I know what she did," Ethan whispered, "but I'm not like you. I won't finish your hate." Thomas raised a gun. "She burned my life to ash, boy. The least I can do is pass the flame." The rain began again, soft at first, then heavier, blurring the edges of the world. Clara's breath came in short bursts as she edged sideways, searching for cover, or for words that could stop a man who'd lived too long inside his pain. "Thomas," she said softly, stepping forward, her press badge visible against her jacket. "You've been running from the fire for decades, but you never left it, did you? It's still burning inside you. Let it die here. Tonight." Thomas's gaze flicked toward her, cold, almost curious. "You think this is your story to tell, reporter?" "Yes," Clara replied, voice shaking but firm. "Because it's not about the fire anymore. It's about what survives after it." For a moment, he hesitated. Then Ethan moved. It happened fast. Ethan lunged toward his father as the gun went off, the sound splitting the night in two. The shot echoed through the valley, swallowed by the roar of the river below. Clara dropped to her knees, covered her ears as the struggle unfolded. Two shadows locked together, decades of hate and grief colliding under the storm. The pistol clattered across the bridge and slid toward the railing. Ethan pinned Thomas down, rain dripping from his face. "It ends now," he shouted. Thomas's eyes burned with a mad clarity. "You can't erase her sins, or mine." He pushed Ethan backward, sending them both tumbling dangerously close to the edge. The wood groaned beneath their weight. Clara crawled toward the gun, fingers trembling, but the bridge shuddered. One plank snapped, and Thomas slipped. Ethan grabbed his arm instinctively. For a moment, father and son hung between the world above and the river below. Thomas looked up at him, a faint, broken smile cutting through the chaos. "You have her eyes." Then he let go. The river swallowed him whole. Silence followed, the kind that only comes after everything ends. Ethan staggered to his feet, soaked, shaking. He wanted to die," he murmured. Clara stood beside him, unable to speak. The locket, still warm from Thomas's hand, glinted on the ground. She picked it up, thumb tracing over the burned engraving. They watched the river carry away the last remnants of the past. The man, the pain, and the truth no one else would ever truly understand. Ethan turned to her. "What will you write?" Clara hesitated. The recorder still in her hand, its red light blinking. "The truth," she said quietly, "but not the one they'll expect." Days later, her final article went live. The headline read, "The Fire That Loved Too Long, a story of blood, forgiveness, and the river that keeps its secrets." In her closing line, Clara wrote, "Some fires never go out. They just learn to live in the people left behind." As the sun rose over Calverly, the river flowed quietly beneath the bridge, carrying its secrets onward. One more name added to the long list of stories the water would never tell.